You're listening to the Governors Podcast, which is hosted by school governors for school governors and for all involved in or impacted by education governance. On the Governors Podcast, we have open, honest, and transparent discussions about governance in the UK education sector, sharing and providing insights into the realities of entering the boardroom, sitting around the governing board table, and leaning in.
Hello, I'm Sharon Warmington, and as an experienced and qualified governance professional, I support schools and academies at trust and local level in driving governance excellence. I'm also the founder of the National Black Governors Network and the National Association of School and College Clerks. Collectively, with sector partners, we work with individuals and organisations seeking positive change at a strategic and operational level.
Hey, it's Olivia Hinds here, an unapologetic millennial Black woman who is changing the face and space of education governance. I specialise in brand management, digital strategy, and generational diversity, bringing governance into the 21st century. I'm purpose-led and people-focused, bridging the gap between the then and the now.
And you're listening to the Governors Podcast. Okay, let's get into today's topic.
I think this is a very timely conversation because we're actually approaching our 3-year anniversary for the Governors Podcast, which is very exciting. I know those 3 years I feel like have disappeared quite quickly, but there's also been a lot that's happened during that time.
There's been a lot of growth during that time.
There has been a lot of growth during that time, not just in terms of life and age and reaching new milestones, but also things that we've accomplished, people we've connected with, the amount of content that we've shared consistently, given the volume of stuff we do. And so I think it's a bit of a reflection moment. I don't know about you, but I find December/January to be almost like pause and play moments in the calendar year. You come to the end of the calendar year in December, and then everyone's like, you know what? I'll ping that email to January, ping it to January in that
because
kind of
we're all
exhausted.
Festive. Yeah, we're all exhausted. Autumn term in terms of governance is the worst because it's a new year and there's just so much going on. So by November are crawling to December. So
that's
of course,
so true.
Anything that can be pushed into the new calendar year or the new term in terms of academic year is definitely what happens.
I know, but then what happens is what you forget is that a week is just a week. So the week between Christmas and New Year, it is as long as any other week. So before you know it, it is January. And all those things you did ping to January, you now need to face in January.
Plus all the new stuff.
Plus all the new stuff, exactly. And so I think I took a bit of joy, a bit of pleasure in the fact that the school academic year, the spring term, didn't actually start until the beginning of the 8th of January for many schools. Yes. So even though I went back to work on the 2nd of January, I felt like I still had just under a week to really get into that buzz that comes when schools reopen. But what I would also say is that in December, I made a conscious decision to not feel like I need to get everything done in those first few days or first few weeks of the new year, because you could find that you burn out quite quickly. I think our episode around this time last year, in 2023, we talked about how spring has sprung. Because even though autumn is very full, I feel like spring can equally be full if you don't manage your time and your tasks and your own well-being accordingly, so that you actually have energy to sustain yourself throughout the year.
I think in terms of governance and just in terms of what we're talking about today,
Mm-hmm.
I think is
Yeah.
information overload.
Mm-hmm.
I entered the Christmas period. So I closed the year, I think, with about 1,200 emails in my inbox, which was ridiculous.
That's
And
scary.
it's when I started to, I did spend some time, I was determined not to enter the new year with them. So my
Mm-hmm.
deadline was the 31st of December to get them down to less than 100. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found was there was a high volume of emails that I'd received. And it's those ones you sort of scan it and think, oh, I'll
Mm-hmm.
come back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, that's got a bit of information that I need for over there, kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and the information when I look at all the stuff just on governance alone, so
Yeah.
you get I'm signed up to different mailing lists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I receive emails from Google Alerts,
Yes. Yeah.
um, you know, is one of the big ones, and you can get emails anytime governance is mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You get an email, whether irrespective of what sector or anything like that, internationally. So I
Mm-hmm.
get I get hundreds of Google alerts. I get Education Weekly and Schools Week. I get the DFE and the ESFA's weekly update. I get updates from the NGA, the local authority, Birmingham, where I am, governors for schools, Governor Hub, and that's before I even mention.
All the other things in your life.
Hang on, no, that's before I even mention information from the schools and the trust that
Oh
I'm
gosh,
part
yes.
of.
That's
So
so true.
when I started to delete email, I just got to a point where I would search for in my inbox, I would search for Google Alerts and then delete, 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 delete. I
Mm-hmm.
would search for NGA, local authority, whatever, delete, 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 or
Mm-hmm.
put in a folder. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I looked at it, that was easily 50, 60, in some cases, 70% of the
Wow.
volume of emails that I
Wow.
receive. And that just made me more conscious then
Mm-hmm.
of emails that I send out and we
That's
send
so
out,
true. Yes.
because obviously we've got the NASC weekly update that comes
Mm-hmm.
out. And what I try and do with that is to not duplicate what comes out from other places,
Mm-hmm.
because, it's just crazy when you think about it. And how can anybody who is volunteering in this space
Yeah.
keep up with all of that?
And on top of that, just the point you made about the list of all the organizations that send you emails. So that's not the number of emails, because just one of those organizations could you send you 2 or 3 emails a month. That's just the organization list itself, but not the actual volume.
Yeah.
And what that made me think of is the NASC Governance Connections emails that go out weekly. I received that 3 times because
Yeah.
3 of the email addresses or 3 of the mailboxes that I have are
Hmm.
on that mailing list. Now, this is
Yeah.
part of us working together and testing and stuff like that that was done years ago.
Hmm.
But now it's just automatic. I'm just aware that every Monday that email is going to be in my all mailbox list 3 times. And
Yeah.
I will say, I get some satisfaction from deleting the duplicates.
Just
So
because it means your number goes down.
it means my number goes down. So
Yeah.
it's definitely helpful. So it's useful that you bring this to the table for us to discuss, and hopefully our listeners can relate to this as well. Although it's not that we're wishing that any of you have a crazy inbox, but it is a very real thing. Um,
It's getting more real though, because Google and Yahoo, I know, are I think from the 1st of February putting in stricter guidelines and regulations
right.
around mailing lists and
Yeah.
things. Um, so we have to seriously look at this. We cannot
Mm-hmm.
just automatically add people to our subscriber lists.
Yeah.
People have to,
Opt in.
specifically opt in.
Mm-hmm.
And we as an organization need to clean up our lists. When we
Yes.
get people who for argument's sake, may notify us that they're no longer a clerk, and so they are
Mm-hmm.
stepping down from NASC. We actively remove them, and
Yeah.
in the response to them, I do say subscribing is free. You can continue to do that, but I leave it for them to do rather than automatically adding them to a list. And when I've
Yeah.
looked at the kind of things that I'm receiving, it's not that it's not useful
Of
information.
course not. Yeah.
I just have to I've got this the fear of missing out kind of thing, or the fear of missing information.
Yeah.
I have to take some time to
Mm-hmm.
say to myself, okay, what am I realistically going to subscribe to this year?
Mm-hmm.
And allow the things that I'm not engaging with
Mm-hmm.
to be let go.
Yeah. Without feeling any kind of like
Absolutely.
emotion to it, not feeling like you're disappointing anyone. People will understand, because I think this is when you're able to stand on the side of the content consumer and
Hmm.
also the content creator. Because if you just think of what you've just said, you you've used your experiences as a content consumer, being the recipient to all of these emails, and
Yeah.
thinking about the emails that you send, which is the side
Hmm.
of the content creator, which is what I think would be helpful for all organizations to look at. It's not to
Hmm.
say that, as you said, it's not to say that the information that is being sent out isn't useful. A lot of it is, but it
Hmm.
helps to contextualize things like the open rate that organizations see when it comes to the mail outs that they do,
Hmm.
or thinking about how can we streamline our communication rather than send, I don't know, 2 emails in a week. Can we just send one? So
Yes.
it's thinking about where you can content block or content stack. Obviously, we are not saying that the emails have to be much longer just so that you jam pack it into one email, but it's really looking at your email communication strategy and
Hmm.
the impact it has on the recipients. Because as a school governor, I must say, I love when term time is not on and it's switched off. Because as much as I love being a governor, anyone who's met me or heard me speak before, I love being a school governor. I have been for the last 6, maybe 7 years now. So the majority of my 20s being a governor, and I love it. But there's something about not being in term time which gives me a sense of I don't have to feel guilty if I don't look at something, or if I don't read something, or if I don't respond to something, because school's out. But
Yeah.
when school's in, it's like you get your email from your clerk or a head, or the chair's asked you to do something, or you remember that you've got to schedule your school visits and stuff. So on top of all the mailings that you're a part of on a
Hmm.
weekly, monthly basis, it's it's knowing that actual actions can get lost
Yes.
in that long list, which I think is kind of what you were alluding to earlier,
Hmm.
that you're saying from just the sector alone, you're getting a long list of emails. And so sometimes it can be hard to find what you
Well,
actually
you're
need to
exactly,
action or
exactly.
actually need to read in more detail. And so I'm grateful. It's kind of a fine line, because you're grateful for the information that is out there that is being provided to you
Hmm.
by those in the sector. But I think it will be helpful to for all of us, both recipients and those sending out information, to audit that information and say,
Yeah.
is this something that we need to send? That's one. Evaluating the content that is being sent and the timeline. If this is something that could go out at another time, would that be better? So maybe something that school boards, governing boards can do, because this is at school, academy, or trust level,
Hmm.
is maybe as part of a survey with your board members, is ask them about the emails that they receive and if there's any way to support with that, in terms of maybe there could be shared information. So there could be something that one governor's receiving, but a fellow governor isn't, but a fellow
Hmm.
governor may benefit from that information. But also helping with understanding what communication strategy works best for the board, for the trust, for the organization, and just for the individuals operating in the space. Because if you think of new governors,
Mm-hmm.
that will
It's overwhelming. It's too
exactly,
much. It's too
exactly.
much.
And I'm trying more of, I think the more seasoned I become as a governor, which sounds really weird when you're only 30, but the more seasoned I become as a governor, I try and put myself in the shoes of someone who's doing this on day one or someone who's
Yeah.
entering this for the first time, because I know how to filter now. So because I'm used to it, I'm now, I've been in the space long enough. I'm still learning, but I've been in the space long enough to know what I don't need to read that minute so that I'm then not overwhelmed by the 10 emails I receive because I know only 3 need my attention today or
Yeah.
this month or this term. But a new governor could naturally feel like they need to read everything. They need to
Yes.
know all of this right now. And so that in itself could be a barrier to entry or a
It,
barrier to retaining that governor, that
yeah.
person. You don't
It
want to
really,
drain someone's passion on day one.
no, absolutely not. And when I've clerked, wherever I've clerked, I've been very conscious of the subject line when I am
Yes.
emailing my governors. And with somewhere within the subject line or in the first line, I try and indicate the urgency or not
Mm-hmm.
of the communication.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a deadline,
Mm-hmm.
then I will put that in the subject line so
Mm-hmm.
that people, again, when I'm looking through, if
Mm-hmm.
I've got 50 emails, if I've been out all day and I've come back and I've got 50 emails, then I'm going to scan the subject lines
Yeah.
and I'm going to open, because it's the equivalent. I'm old enough, you're not. I'm old enough to remember in the 80s and 90s when I worked as a PA, receiving post,
Oh gosh, yeah.
physical post. And there's a
Yeah.
big debate at the moment about Royal Mail reducing their deliveries
I must
because we're
say
not,
I'm a little bit sad that my letterbox is empty
well,
most times.
we've gone from, I think we've gone from about 20 million letters, I don't know if that's a day or a week, to about
Mhm.
7 million. So it's a
Wow.
significant drop.
Yeah, of course.
And but that communication hasn't stopped. It's just
No.
moved to the digital
Yes.
space.
Hmm.
Now, if I received on a daily
Oh
basis
yeah,
50
true.
letters, 50 physical letters, I
Yeah.
would not be expected to
Yeah.
deal with all of those letters in a day. And
So
so I
true.
had to train my own brain in that way to say, or to remove the pressure from myself to
Hmm.
feel obligated to open, read, and respond to emails in that volume. And it's
Yeah.
like, all the work that I do around diversity, I get so many people saying, Sharon, can you help us to diversify our board? And Sharon, can you guide us
Mhm.
on this? And Sharon, and it's like, nah. I've learned to say to the computer, nah, I'm
Not
not doing that,
today.
not doing that today. And I've also learned not to apologize for not responding straight
Yes.
away, because
Yes.
that's the other thing. It's almost like, oh, I'm really sorry for my delayed response, or I'm
But
really
are
sorry.
you?
Why are you sorry?
Yeah.
Why you got to it when you were able to
When
get
you
to
had the
it?
capacity to.
Right. If you've missed a deadline or something like that,
That's
then yes,
different.
an
Yeah.
apology is warranted. But to apologize repeatedly just for the fact that you didn't respond to an email when it was received,
And
no,
we're not saying don't be courteous or considerate of
absolutely.
someone else's time. It's just really understand what you're apologizing for, because if you otherwise you could end up devaluing your own apology, your own remorse, because
Yeah,
it can be received as if it was said passively. Because when you really think about it, if you were to rewind I don't know, the half an hour or the day or the week that it took you to respond, when
hmm,
you really look at what you were doing in that time, you genuinely were unable to respond. This was the
absolutely.
next best time for you to reply. So if you think about it, are you really sorry when
Mm,
something else was prioritized at the time that you didn't respond earlier? So
yeah,
it's factoring that in. Just as you were talking about imagine if all the emails that you receive today, and when I say today, I mean in the present day, still came via mail, what that would feel like. I don't know why, or maybe I do, but it took me to, now I know that I'm more acquainted with this, but you may remember this too. It took me to the scene in Harry Potter when Harry gets his letter from Hogwarts. I don't know if anyone
Yes,
else has heard of it or
I
seen that
remember that.
scene, and the floods of letters coming in. Now, the thing is, they didn't know that all of the letters said the same thing, but all
Yeah.
of the letters say the same thing because we just wanted to make sure. I say we, like I'm a part of Hogwarts, but we just wanted to make sure that Harry received his letter. He only opened one, he only read one, he only acknowledged and actioned one. And look where it took him. Now, I know
Yeah.
that may seem like a very profound analogy or a very abstract analogy.
No, but it's true.
But when you think about it, imagine every day you open your inbox and you see 50 emails. If you don't respond or action 50 emails, but you do 10% of that, so you do 5, rather than feel bad about the 45 that you didn't do, the 5 that you did do were the ones that you were supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And so it's being able to manage the way you, or have more control of how you react to things, or take or you are proactive with the things that you can control, because you may never be able to fully control how many emails you receive from all the people you're connected to, but you are in control over how you react to the number that you see, or how you respond to each of those emails, or even feeling less guilty about taking yourself off a mailing list for emails that you don't really read.
Yes.
And there's nothing stopping you from resubscribing to lists when they will be more useful to you later on down the line. You can take a breather.
I think it's about taking control.
That's it.
Because one of the things that I've learned to do, is to create boundaries, physical boundaries, digital boundaries. So the two things that I do work 7 days a week, but I don't work 24 hours a day.
Oh, yes.
So I may decide not to work for the rest of the afternoon, because I know that what I've got left to do, I can do it on a Saturday morning. So the point I'm making is my working pattern should not dictate how somebody else responds.
Yes.
So just because I send an email on a Sunday night, you shouldn't feel obligated to reply to me on a Sunday night. Does that make sense?
Makes absolute sense.
I've had people say to me, Sharon, these are my working hours. Can you communicate with me during my working hours?
No.
And I will say, but those are not my working hours.
Exactly.
So I'm working within my working hours, but there is no obligation for you to respond. So that's a really, really important thing. And when I was working for one of the large trusts in the UK, I actually put it in my email signature.
Yeah.
That in a nutshell, I work unusual working patterns. You are not obligated to respond outside of your working hours. And then secondly, what I've done with my phone, because we do sit in front of the TV, and if our phone pings, we do look at our emails.
Yes.
And because I couldn't control the ping, I just couldn't. I couldn't resist the ping. What I've done is set up a do not disturb on my phone.
Good.
So automatically 8:30 every night, my phone goes on to do not disturb until 9 a.m. the following morning. Good. Which means unless you are on my emergency list, you cannot call me, you cannot contact me. If you text me, WhatsApp me, email me, they will be received, but I won't be notified.
Yeah.
So then I don't feel like, because you can ignore a ding, but you always know it's there.
Yeah, that's so true.
And then if another ding comes in, and it's like, oh God, there's another one, it must be urgent.
Yeah.
So we convince ourselves that we have to respond. So
Mm.
you cannot control the things that are outside of your control, but the
Yeah.
things that are inside your control, you must control. And
Yeah.
so bringing it all back to governance now and
Yeah.
governors,
Hmm.
it's important that you, as volunteers, retain control of your time.
Yes.
You
Yes.
are volunteers and we appreciate you volunteering, but you are still in complete control of your time. And it's not for us to dictate how you spend that time.
I hear that.
And I want governors to know and understand that,
I
because I
hear that.
don't want it to be a barrier, because I often hear people say, oh, it's just too much, it's just too
Mm.
overwhelming.
Mm.
I don't have the time. And so I'm in WhatsApp groups and
Mhm.
I will put them on.
Mute.
I will.
Mute.
You said
As
that
you,
a bit too passionately,
that's
Olivia.
because I'm familiar with the feature. That's all.
But yeah, I will put it on. I will put it on mute.
Yeah.
So yes, thank you very much for your Christmas messages and your New Year's messages, but you didn't get a response from Sharon because you were on mute.
You are mute.
Not no, there's no offense. It's not that I'm not sociable or
It's not
whatever.
personal, but it
Not
is.
personal, but it's personal to me. It's not
Exactly.
personal to you, but it's
But it's
personal to
personal to
me.
me. Hmm.
I've created those boundaries, and I would encourage, especially in the digital space, because the digital space isn't going anywhere anytime soon,
Hmm.
that we have to be responsible for creating our boundaries so
Hmm.
that we can continue to operate, but so that we retain that work, volunteer, life balance properly.
I'm actually putting life at the beginning these days. I heard once towards the end of the last year, I think it was the last quarter of 2023, that I came across a quote or a post that says something about why do we say work-life balance when it should be life-work balance? Work is
Yeah, that's true.
incorporated into your life, not the other way around. So you don't find a piece of time for life in your working experience. It's knowing that work is incorporated into your life. So the living happens first.
Yeah,
And
but
so,
for many, I think it's that way around, because for many, the work needs to come first in order for you to have any kind of life.
well, then that's something for you to address as an individual, then.
Yeah.
It's knowing that you, very much what you were saying, you are in control of what you can control. And
Mm-hmm.
so having that perspective could help you make some habit shifts, because it's your habits that create the routine and the experiences that you have. So what you were saying about the ding and not
Mm-hmm.
having those digital boundaries, I usually just refer to everything as boundaries, but I do like the term digital boundaries, especially because we live in a digital
Mm-hmm.
society. We live in a digital world. Things, tech is not going anywhere. We are only going to find even more convenience through
Yeah.
use of technology. And so it's knowing that you still are a human being. You are not a machine. So whilst
Mm-hmm.
everything else is going AI, you aren't. So it's ensuring that you you know what your protected space is.
Mm-hmm.
And just following on from a point you were mentioning about how all of these tips and experiences and thoughts contribute to the education governance space and the life of being a governor. I've actually practiced that whole knowing my own work style, my own work pattern, knowing that what is someone else's priority doesn't necessarily mean it's my priority. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm conscious of, one, not responding to any emails regarding being a school governor on the weekend. I used to when I
Mm-hmm.
started. I
Mm-hmm.
may catch up on emails to my clerk or my school or whatever on the weekend. Don't cut that out. Don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. Saturday and Sunday is for me to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And I've decided that I'm going to bounce those responding to those emails, those actions during the work week. We don't have school governor meetings on a weekend. Therefore, I'm not working on a weekend in terms of that volunteering hat. But what I also do is think, okay, when would I usually have a school governor meeting? This is a way that people could approach things. And so my meetings tend to be scheduled between 5:30 and 7:30 on a weekday, usually a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So across my LGB, local governing board meetings, and the two committees that I sit on for my school, teaching and
Mm-hmm.
learning, where I'm the chair, and finance committee, all of those meetings happen between 5:30 and 7:30 on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. That's when I will respond to emails to do with anything about being a school governor. No other time of the day do I have to
Wow.
feel obligated. Not to say I won't respond to an email
Yeah.
in the morning or the afternoon. Sometimes that may
Especially if
work
there's an
better,
emergency or something.
especially if you need to contact us, the school whilst it's open, because
Yeah.
obviously from 3:30, 4 o'clock, you can't expect school staff to know that that you need something because
Mm-hmm.
they're away from their school. So that's respecting their time. But
Mm-hmm.
I will, if there's anything not even major, anything that I can respond to, if I do it when I would usually have a school governor meeting or on a
Mm-hmm.
day or time when I have a school governor meeting, it just helps me to organize my thoughts. So then I'm not having to think about, I don't know, a Monday morning or even a Tuesday afternoon. I can be like, wow, I'm at work. So why am I going to
Mm-hmm.
put the pressure on myself to try and respond to an email when I'm not wearing that hat yet? I'm not able to because I'm in my work hours. So then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, think of when you would have a meeting, catch up on emails then. Sometimes, just based on what you were saying about everyone works different work patterns, whilst I have my work days in my work signature, what I may do is send meetings that I want the school to see at like probably just before I go to bed. I do this sometimes because then I know, or I hope, that it's then more at the top of their inbox than at the
Yeah.
bottom of it.
Awesome. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
I try and message the school during the school day for something that isn't urgent but still is important, because those are two different things, then know that the school, the teachers, the senior leaders, they're communicating with each other throughout the day. They're probably receiving emails from parents
Parents
and
and yeah.
etc. So my email is just going to fall lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. So I'm thinking, okay, if I'm going to bed at 11, then I'll send my email at 10:30 if it's a quick one. So then hopefully when they're in at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, they're more likely
Mm-hmm.
to see it. So it's just thinking about being smart with your time so that time doesn't feel hard. Like
I like that.
trying to get through everything. So then that 1,200, although I would literally scream if I ever entered a day and saw 1,200 emails, because I have a thing about having the unread notifications. I like to open my emails and then flag them, and I may even color code my flags because then I know what I need to action, what I can delete, and what can wait. But it's just knowing that you can put in these controls, just like all devices, they have a settings app. You just need to reevaluate your settings
Mm-hmm.
for yourself. I'm not
Please,
talking about actually, well, you can do it as well. Go set up your do not disturbs and all of that. But just think of having a moment to reset
mm-hmm.
or evaluate the settings that you've previously had and what's no longer serving you.
And I think that is the key, reevaluating, reviewing. Just because you
Mm-hmm,
did it that way
mm-hmm,
doesn't mean you should continue to do it that way if it's
mm-hmm,
not working for you. And so just going back over some of the stuff that you've said, 1,200 emails, just to explain that, I have, I think, 10 different inboxes.
yeah.
So it was a combination of all of that. It wasn't all from schools or
Mm-hmm,
anything like that, and I do open them all. And it's the scanning and kind of I want to read that more in detail, or I want to register for that event, or
mm-hmm,
whatever it is. So, but decisions when I got to Christmas and I did clear them, and now I try to keep it under 100. As of this morning, I saw it go to 170, and I was like, "Whoa, gotta change that." Um, but I stepped down from a board because of it. I
mm-hmm,
stepped down from a board. I usually try and avoid doing that until it's like I like to give notice and I like to do it at the end of the academic year. But I just went into overwhelm. And with elderly parents as well, I was reviewing and reevaluating where my time was being spent
Mhm.
and decided that I needed to spend more time with my parents,
Mhm.
who are both still here,
Mhm.
and I'm grateful for that. But that became the priority. And so being in a meeting, reading papers for a meeting, being on the committee paled. It wasn't that it wasn't important. It wasn't that I didn't want to do it, but I had to make a tough decision. I
Yeah.
also gave notice on another school, which I will step down at the end of this academic year and help them to backfill my position because that's equally important. I don't just want to disappear and leave a gap.
Mhm.
I want to help the organization to move forward. But I think one of the things as governors also, and it's something that I say to clerks a lot or governance professionals a lot, don't assume that governors will read papers at the weekend
Yeah. Mhm.
because sometimes getting papers out, and I've been involved in governing boards that have done this. The practice is the standard is 7 days before a meeting, and I
Mhm.
understand that sometimes papers can be late and all that, but getting them out on a Friday evening,
Mhm.
you are then assuming
Mhm.
that your governors or your trustees are going to read it over the weekend, and you should not assume that.
Mhm.
That is their time. It's the weekend for a reason. If
Mhm.
you're going to push the button to upload papers to Governor Hub or upload them to whatever portal you're using or to send them out via email, and you're going to disappear and have a very nice Friday evening and go cycling on the weekend or whatever, and you've literally left your governors to
Mhm.
read the papers over the weekend for a meeting that's happening on Monday or Tuesday.
Mm.
No, as a governor myself, if
Yeah.
I'm ever in that position, and I have been in that position, I have refused to read the paper, and I've
Mhm.
gone into that meeting and been very clear. I
Mhm.
cannot make a decision on this paper because I haven't read it because we didn't follow our terms and condition our terms of
Oh,
reference to
not the
meet the seven
holding
days.
accountable.
Oh, absolutely. Because otherwise things become a habit.
Yeah, it's so true.
It becomes very habitual. Again, if there are reasons why,
Of course, yeah.
and there can be the odd reasons, but practice. If
Yes.
it has become practice to
Hmm.
send papers 3 days before a meeting, including the weekend,
Hmm.
no, that's not acceptable at all. And as governors, we're the ones who are there to challenge
Hmm.
and not just challenge the leadership in terms of the information that's presented to us, but challenge them in terms of when the information
Yeah.
comes to us
The
as well.
coordination of it.
Absolutely.
Before I respond to that, I think we should hear from our sponsors and then we'll continue with the conversation.
Governor Hub is proud to support the Governor's podcast. As a leading provider of online governance support, we know that confident and well-equipped governors bring about positive and meaningful change. So when you've been inspired to do your best by really leaning in on the topics that matter, you can rely on us for the tools to help your board work better, the guidance and training to develop your skills, and a secure online body of evidence for when it matters most. Visit thehoot.news to join us and feel part of something bigger.
So in terms of the time frame between when you receive papers and when the meeting is, I think
Mhm.
um I'm sure we've discussed this previously, or I think I've been a fly on the wall when you've done a training session and you've mentioned this in
Mhm.
terms of I know I know you could have a really good clerk
Mhm.
and clerks are usually clerks and governance professionals are usually the ones that coordinate the communication with the governing board, um, be that a school board or be that
Mhm.
a trust board. And I know that there are clerks who would prefer, or in their practice, they may not prefer, they may have subconsciously been doing this, rather than a conscious decision to do this, to wait until they've got all of the papers before they then send them to governors. There's clerks, governance professionals who do that. And there are others who stick to their own standard, as it were, to still communicate with the governors a week before, 7 days before the date of the meeting. And so whatever papers they have at that time, they send them.
Absolutely.
And then if there are any papers that come after the clerk's governance professional's own deadline, then they will notify the governors to say, just to let you know, another paper has been added, or another paper is expected to be added within the next 24, 48 hours, or whatever it is. And I think that helps, because I've experienced both. I've experienced clerks who have sent the papers a few days before the meeting because they've said, I wanted to wait until I had all the papers first. And then I've had clerks who have honored that 7 day prior to the meeting rule, and then have notified us if there is a paper or two to follow. Yeah. And so it's all in communication.
Yeah, it's really difficult for governance professionals.
Yeah.
Because we don't generate the papers.
No, you don't.
We don't write the reports. So we often get the blame for papers coming late. And I'm very clear. Like,
not me.
I'm the person who will, and it's not even about Sharon. It's about the terms of reference. The terms of reference are very clear. When I'm entering any school as a governance professional in any capacity, I read the terms of reference for every committee. I read the mem and arts. I read all of the governance documentation, and I operate within that. And I will refer to that. If somebody says to me, "Oh, just hold the papers and my report's coming," I will say no, because the terms of reference, as agreed by the governing board, clearly state that papers are to be sent 7 days before. And it's not Sharon saying it. That's just what's written down. The annoying thing is that because of the way my brain works, whenever, irrespective of how I get my papers, because not all clerks and governance professionals do what I do, which is to create a single document.
Yes. Yeah.
So when I'm preparing for a meeting, I will go on to, all of my schools are on Governor Hub. I will go on to Governor Hub, download the documents and merge them into one single file.
Yeah.
So that I can open it on my tablet and annotate.
Yes.
Because that's how, when I'm reading, I will highlight things. I will put questions in there so that when I'm in the meeting, I'm not opening and closing documents all over the shop.
Which is overload within itself.
Absolutely. So if I've done that 5 days before the meeting, and then other papers arrive, I've already started my process, my planning process, and I've now got what could be a crucial document.
Yeah, that's true.
So I've either got to re-merge and then re-annotate or ignore. Because if I've planned in my diary, because this is the other thing that I do, for every meeting that I've got in my diary, I will plan a block of time of when I'm going to read the papers and prepare for that meeting.
I hear that.
And if that is 5 days before or 2 days before,
that's up to you.
Yeah, once that time has gone, I'm not reading anything else.
Because you have other things.
Because I've got other things.
Yeah.
I've got other things to do. I'm juggling so many different things in my diary, and I will honor what's in my diary. So if I've allocated between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. on Friday, the 7th of February, to read papers for a meeting on the 9th of February, and then there's something arrives at 3 o'clock. After I've read the papers and I'm in a meeting, or I've got something else in my diary, I'm not going. Failure to plan does not become my emergency.
Yeah, it's true. It is true.
Again, if it's expected, if it's anticipated, if you're waiting for an announcement from the DfE or something from the local
Yeah, there's
authority
conditions if it's
that's going to impact, right, that's fine. But no, under normal circumstances, I just don't do it. And I will be very clear in the meeting. I cannot contribute to the discussion. I cannot ask any questions because my brain, again, I can't just be in a meeting, read a paper and get involved in discussion. I'm a
That's so
details
true.
person. I need to read things
And
in advance
digest.
and digest things, which is why if I'm in attendance at anything, if there's a presentation going on and stuff like that, I will make notes and things, but you will rarely hear me discuss because that's not my learning style. It's just not the way I learn.
I think that's a really good point to raise, and I'm sure we've covered it before, but it's important to reiterate these key things because, for example, we don't know if this is the first episode or the first conversation that someone's going to hear. And so these are very important things to consider when you are supporting governors, but also something to consider when you are one. Knowing yourself. I think we've talked about, I know you and I always have this conversation about knowing who you are and what works for you and the way in which you absorb information and not assuming that everyone else absorbs or learns or communicates in the same way that you do.
Absolutely.
And so for someone else, some people love emails. They're fine with emails or they don't even think about it. They're neutral to it. Other people cannot stand emails, so they may respond to them, but it does something to their energy when they receive an email. You see a lot of memes about emails and how different people feel about them, whether it's about your generation, whether it's about your experience, whether it's about the volume, whether it's just the task. You know, everyone has a different spectrum about everything.
Yes.
And it's being able to coordinate that, which can be challenging, but it's also knowing that if everyone was the same, life would be very boring. And it's how you can know yourself better as an individual to be able to communicate in spaces however is appropriate about what works for you and what you can be adaptable to as well. Because just like what you said about how you need to digest information and you need yourself time to build that in. I know me and you are very different when it comes to taking in information. Like I could read something on a day or in an hour and then be able to generate questions for it after that. What I can tell you though is I feel very exhausted the following day. So whilst I'm able to deliver on
because the concentration
it takes for my brain to take that information in and process it and feed something back, whilst in the moment it's great, it seems phenomenal. I almost seem like an alien. But the following day, I feel very exhausted. I've become very aware of that because of the way my brain processes information. Sometimes if I'm given too much time, I can almost push it back until it's actually needed because I do very well in concentrated time. I know
that's why you're a good chair. That's why I don't chair very well, in my opinion.
I never even thought that.
Yeah, as a chair, in any capacity, you need to have that overarching view. You need to be able to hear information and summarize things. I can't do that.
Wow.
I've recently been invited to speak at an event, and I was asked to chair the panel or to host the panel, and I said no. I says I won't make a very good host because I'm used to speaking a lot rather than hearing people speak and sort of carrying the session like that. And they immediately came back to me and said, "Thank you for your honesty and your level of self-awareness." And I never thought about it like that, but I've seen myself, and I can chair if I need to.
Wow, I never thought that at all.
That's why I admire the way you can chair. You just have this ability to hear all the discussion going on and then to summarize and to pull this point and that point. No, I didn't get that gift.
But if we circle back to this, if we circle back to the discussion topic though, about
information
overload. Your information overload happens in the moment. I don't experience overload in the moment. My overload is almost delayed, because if you hear what I said about how I feel exhausted the following day, in the moment, I can take all that information, give it to me. That works. Can't. Sometimes getting information too slowly doesn't work for me, but having different people speaking about different things, my brain just stays on track and is able to follow. But then maybe the evening or the day after or a couple of days after, it's almost like I need to recharge. And I've never thought of it like that in terms of how my brain works, lends itself well to chairing when there's multiple people in a discussion. It just never.
I can answer questions. I can answer questions in a heartbeat and come up with ideas and things like that. But in terms of receiving information in volume, I need time to consider, digest, because I'm a completer finisher. I'm a reflective. I need to reflect. That's why I need my papers in advance. I need to be able to read through and annotate and ask the questions as they come to me. If I'm hearing information for the first time, I rarely have a question.
Wow.
Because my brain just hasn't been given enough time to digest what's been said enough to then come back and have a question. I just recognize it.
And that's why I said it's very important to know yourself and know how to self-manage, self-regulate once you become even more self-aware about who you are and how you receive information and how you process it, and also the aftermath as well, so that you can know yourself going into something and coming out, and not just when you're in it, because that helps to feed forward into the things that you put yourself forward for. Just like I think this is the first time I've heard you say that you don't feel that you chair as well as you would like to based on what you know about yourself. It's not to say you cannot, but you just recognize it takes you a few more thoughts to consider chairing something based on what you know of yourself. And so
because it's a skill in itself.
I hear that. Whereas me, before I became a chair of a committee or ever chaired a meeting, I would second guess whether I had the skill set to do it, because I was basing it on age and experience, not based on how my brain processes things and how I navigate conversations and dialogue and stuff. So I appreciate your very honest moment about how you've made decisions based on what you know about yourself, because it actually gave me food for thought about myself. So that was very interesting. It's
recognizing who you are and what you bring to the table, and it's also knowing that you don't want a board full of people who are chairs.
Oh no.
You don't. You need the whole spectrum, which is why diversity, although through my lens it's about race, but diversity is about a much wider conversation, because you don't want a board full of people who can chair. You want people who are going to be thought-provoking and into the detail of decisions that need to be made, and can spot a figure on a balance sheet that doesn't seem quite right, of thing. I'm that person. Whereas other people may just think, oh well, that looks okay, or not even get into the detail of the figures and the fact that the pupil premium fund is much higher than it should be. Why aren't we spending this kind of thing on the children in the school?
It's recognizing that you need the chair needs those people, needs a variety of people. Otherwise, what are you coordinating? It's like getting a whisk and a bowl and you're not whipping anything. So if you don't have all the ingredients there to bring
just whipping air.
Whipping air. Right. I'm gonna produce. You get no cake from that. Like we've been there. So no, it's a very good point you make. And talking about just, I think this is where we can probably go into our takeaways because I do have a final thought on this. I love the certainty of getting the papers in advance. So getting them 7 days before. But if I'm honest, and for those of the listening community of the Governor's podcast, you know that I will have my honest moments and I will confess things on here. If I'm honest, I'd say the bulk of the reading that I do, the bulk of the preparation that I do for my meetings, I do on the day of the meeting, because for me, my ideas, my thoughts, reading the papers it's the freshest if I read it on the day. I still do some reading beforehand, maybe on the train to Birmingham, because obviously I live in Manchester, so I travel for my meetings. Or maybe a couple of days before, I may open the biggest papers that are in the pack, or just to get I may skim just to get an idea, get a gist of some things. But I'd say the bulk of my reading, the more the detail happens on the day of my meeting, usually because I have the capacity to do that. Because then they're fresh. But I never really thought about it before until we talked about how our two brains process information differently. Now, it's not to say that I would feel comfortable receiving the papers on the day. I like having the option to choose when I read those papers.
Yes.
So receiving them early gives me, it puts me at ease. Okay, I've got the time. So if I did want to read them earlier, I can. But I do read them, most of them, on the day.
I think the point is that there needs to be a set a set timeline, because as I said, the governing board will be made up of different people. Some people will, as soon as they land, they're opening them and they're starting to read them. Other people, like yourself, because of the way your brain works, you can do that on the day. There's no way I could do that on the day. It just wouldn't happen.
Insane, I will say.
It just wouldn't happen. But it speaks to how your brain works, how you're able to get information. You're a speed reader as well. So you can read and digest and analyze, all in like one fluid motion. For somebody like me, who all of my life, so it's got nothing to do with age, all of my life I've been a very details person. So I will spot, the margins on something if they're off. I will,
formatting of the page.
Yeah, I will spot,
and that will distract you. Yeah.
Right. If something's been cut and paste from somewhere else and the fonts don't look the same, and it's like what are you doing? Kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I just recognize the way my brain works and the way I like to operate. I'm very methodical in that way.
Yes, you're very chronological. I think
I can plan to be innovative. That's how
mine just comes.
I can plan to be, excited about something.
I hear that. I remember when you first said that to me, I was like, what do you mean? You plan to have your creative energy? What do you mean? So you can say, okay, Tuesday at 2 I'm gonna create, and you get to Tuesday at 2 and you create, huh?
Yeah.
What? Whereas me, I'm not even looking at the time. I either have the idea and I run with it, or I don't. But then that's why sometimes I can end up spending hours on things, because I almost get lost in completing it. So it's just knowing that people process things differently, because I still see what you're saying. Like, I'm still a details person and I have a design eye. So I can see if, I don't know, the font changed midway through a sentence or something, or if something's off center, misaligned, or whatever. But at the same time, it depends on what I'm working on or what hat I'm wearing and what I need to do. So obviously the way I read papers when I'm the chair of the meeting for those papers is very different to the way I read papers for the meeting I'm not chairing. And so it's just factoring all those nuances of each person and each experience and each setting that you're in. But that was a very long takeaway.
That's good. My takeaway, I suppose, going back to the top of how this whole conversation started, is just to be more mindful of the barriers that I've created for myself, to remove myself from things that are just there filling up my inbox and not really serving a purpose, and to encourage anybody listening to this to do the same,
Yeah.
unapologetically, really. So long as you are receiving the communication from your school that you need to when you need to receive it, anything else, be mindful of that. And even the communication from the school, I get school newsletters and all sorts of things that I don't read, because in my mind, those are operational. They're for the stakeholders that are parents and things like that, and not for me. So, just being mindful, I think. It's a long year. And we want to, more than anything, we want to retain the governors that we currently have volunteering in our schools. And we want to encourage new volunteers to join. So I think part of the retention is to be very clear about only sharing information that is going to serve them.
That was good. That was good. We needed that. Top end of 2024. The year of so much more.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Please rate, review, and subscribe via your preferred streaming platform. The Governors Podcast is a brand of the legal entity Education Governance Solutions Limited, and a free training resource for anyone. So if you know someone who is interested in becoming a governor or a trustee, please share this podcast with them. And if you'd like to get in touch with us directly with questions or comments, then drop us an email at thegovernorspodcast@gmail.com.
You can also follow us on social media platforms at The Governors Podcast. Let's connect.